Merry Christmas, everybody. We're certainly glad you guys are tuning into this week's InFocus here at La Center Church. One of the things that we like to do in InFocus is to highlight various things that is spoken about in the biblical text. This week, we're going to be highlighting the city of Bethlehem, or the village of Bethlehem, depends on when you look at it, and some interesting facts about it.
Yeah, so Bethlehem was located just about 6 miles southwest of Jerusalem. So for us, in our perspective here, we are in La Center, and 6 miles southwest would be a little bit past Ridgefield. So it wasn't a great distance. And it was also, the elevation was around 2,600 feet elevation. Now we are at about 100, so you can kind of imagine that gain. Although Jerusalem was around 2,400 feet elevation. So it wasn't a lot of difference, but it was very much a mountainous area and a hill country. And they had lots of fertile valleys all around Bethlehem. And so in those valleys, they planted, crops such as wheat and barley. We saw that in the book of Ruth. And they had vineyards and, growing grapes for wine, and of course a lot of olive groves.
Now, when it comes to that, an interesting thing that I found out when studying Bethlehem and studying Christmas is a lot of people think that for whatever reason that the sheep would not be actually in the fields during December. In fact, that's actually contrary to what actually takes place there historically. One of the things is Bethlehem is very much a Mediterranean style weather, and everything dries out towards the end of the final wheat harvest, and for the entire fall season you're not really depending on crops for your livestock. You are feeding them what you already have. And come December, though, that's when the first rains take place and the first of the green, fresh grass happens in Bethlehem. And when that takes place, as December goes along, you take your sheep further and further into the hill country. And that's particular what took place there. And it's kind of mild in temperature, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And actually, temperatures in the summertime are averaging around 73 degrees. I mean, that's almost perfect.
Oh, that's amazing.
And then in the wintertime, it averages around 57. But I have seen pictures of snow, so they might have had a white Christmas that first year.
That'd be interesting.
That's pretty interesting, yeah. So tell us a little bit about the Old Testament. What was going on in the Old Testament as this city was kind of becoming established?
So interesting things. This is a very old city, and possibly actually was a Canaanite city before, and it was a caravan route that went through that area. And so the initial settlements that took place were for that route to possibly Jerusalem or other cities. But later in the book of Joshua, we see that this was conquered by Caleb's family, and we believe that the city or the town of Bethlehem was set up by Caleb's son, Salma.
Yeah, very interesting. So we also saw that Ruth was a part of that, and so Ruth and Naomi, that's where they resided, especially at the inn. And what else was significant?
Well, another significant thing when it comes to the city is, yes, how it is played out in the biblical timeline. It's a very special city that has Ruth and Naomi being a part of it. Also, King David. It was actually more prominent initially than it is today. It became a fortified city by David, or earlier on, and you wouldn't fortify a small village, you would fortify something you found important. And the reason they fortified Bethlehem is because it was a outpost for Jerusalem in protecting it. And so it was had a place of prominence earlier on. However, after the Babylonian conquest, a lot of things shifted and changed. And so by the time you actually get to the New Testament, the landscape is, and the value, importance of it has changed quite a bit.
It very much was. It was just kind of a small village. It wasn't a significant thing, except for the fact that it was still the city of David.
Precisely.
And then so when Caesar Augustus called for a census, everybody that was related to David had to go to that town. Of course, there was a big influx of people, and that's why there was no room for Mary and Joseph and for her giving birth. And they had to go out into probably a cave or a shelter of some sort to give birth. But that brings us also up to it was significant in that day for the shepherds. They were out in the fields and probably on the hillsides around Bethlehem. They figure the place they were was just maybe a couple miles from where the birth was taking place. And then later, Mary and Joseph found a house. They made their residence here in Bethlehem, and the wise men visited them at their house.
And some estimate that the wise men came approximately 1 to 2 years later. The word that is actually used for Jesus at that time is separate and kind of references a small child or toddler. And so they were there, established for a little while before the wise men came by.
And of course, then we have the story of the slaughter of King Herod, slaughtering all the male children. And they because Bethlehem was a small place at that point, they don't believe that there were a lot of children, maybe a dozen children that were killed at that point in the history of the New Testament.
And that's why one of the reasons why when people actually wonder about this, they're like, why were there no historical records about this slaughter? Because in the grand scheme of King Herod and what he did, this was actually a very, very small and insignificant. Not insignificant to the people it involved, but in the grand scheme, it wasn't something that someone would have wrote down in history.
Yes. Well, today, the city of Bethlehem has around 60,000 people, and half of the people that are living there today are Muslim, and half are Christian Orthodox. And it is controlled now by the Palestinian Authority, and so if you go online and you look at pictures, you'll often see captions about how bad Israel is, which is all political, and they're part of that West Bank. But anyway, we're glad that you tuned in today to see a little bit about Bethlehem and our InFocus, and we hope you'll join us on Sunday.
Thank you guys very much. Have a Merry Christmas.